We're taught that punishment is supposed to reform, rehabilitate, and restore balance to society. But sometimes a judge wakes up, has their morning coffee, and decides that what the world really needs is a little more chaos. Welcome to the bizarre intersection where the legal system meets performance art, where courtrooms transform into stages for public humiliation, and where sentences are so absurdly creative they sound like rejected reality TV concepts. These are 50 real punishments that prove justice doesn't just have a sense of humor. It has a twisted, diabolical comedy writing room. 1. A teenager in Wisconsin thought it would be hilarious to egg his neighbor's house on Halloween. The judge thought it would be even more hilarious to sentence him to sit on his own front porch for an entire evening while people threw eggs at him. The catch? His parents had to participate. For 2 hours, this kid became a human target in a court-ordered egg bombardment, turning his own prank into a sticky, humiliating lesson in karmic justice. The judge didn't just punish the crime. He created a sequel where the original criminal became the victim in his own poorly written story. 2. In Tennessee, a man was caught stealing gas by filling up his tank and driving off without paying. When he appeared before Judge Haywood, the sentence was delightfully simple. The man had to push his car from the courthouse to the gas station he'd stolen from, a distance of 11 miles. No riding, no towing, just pure manual labor on public roads. For an entire day, he became a one-man automotive parade of shame, proving that sometimes the best punishment isn't jail time. It's just making someone really tired and publicly embarrassed. 3. A college student in Illinois was busted for creating and selling fake IDs to his classmates. The judge, recognizing the entrepreneurial spirit buried under the criminal stupidity, offered a deal. Instead of jail, the student had to create a presentation on the dangers of identity fraud and deliver it to every single high school in the county. But here's the twist. He had to wear a giant name tag that said "Faker" for every presentation. The judge turned him from an underground businessman into a touring cautionary tale, complete with costume. 4. After a woman in Georgia was convicted of shoplifting makeup worth over $300, Judge Tammy Kemp decided cosmetic justice was required. The sentence? The woman had to attend court every week for a month with absolutely zero makeup, jewelry, or hairstyling. She had to sit in the courtroom, completely natural, while the judge lectured about vanity versus necessity. It's a punishment that attacks the ego directly, stripping away the very thing she was willing to steal for. 5. A man in Louisiana had a nasty habit of throwing his trash out of his car window. After multiple violations, a judge had enough. The sentence was poetically disgusting. The man had to spend 8 hours a day for a week working at the local landfill, but his job wasn't processing trash. It was sitting in a small office inside the dump, watching educational videos about environmental conservation, while surrounded by the smell of rotting garbage. The judge created an aromatic prison designed to make every breath a reminder of his crime. 6. 2 brothers in Arizona got into a fistfight so violent that neighbors called the police. When they stood before Judge Larry, he saw them not as criminals, but as siblings who'd forgotten what family meant. His sentence? For 30 days, they had to live together in the same apartment, and they weren't allowed to speak to each other. They could only communicate through written notes. The judge didn't separate them. He forced them into the most awkward silent roommate situation imaginable, turning their home into a monastery of resentment and post-it notes. 7. A professional photographer in California was caught secretly filming people at a gym without their consent. The judge sentenced him to something brilliantly ironic. He had to attend 50 hours of community service modeling for an amateur photography class. For weeks, he was the subject, not the photographer, forced to stand still while dozens of cameras clicked at him from every angle. The judge reversed his entire relationship with the camera, transforming the voyeur into the perpetually viewed. 8. In Maryland, a teenager was caught spray painting graffiti on a historic bridge. The judge gave him 2 options: 200 hours of community service, or paint a mural on the side of the courthouse under professional supervision with a subject of the court's choosing. He chose the mural. The subject? A giant portrait of the judge himself. For 3 weeks, this kid had to paint a 20-foot-tall monument to the man who sentenced him, creating permanent public art dedicated to his own humiliation. 9. A woman in Nevada was convicted of harassing her ex-husband with hundreds of phone calls a day. The judge's solution was technologically sadistic. She was allowed to keep her phone phone, but for 6 months, every outgoing call had to be approved by her probation officer first. She had to text her PO, explain who she wanted to call and why, wait for approval, and only then could she make the call. The judge didn't take away her communication. He just turned every 8 conversation into a bureaucratic nightmare requiring pre-authorization. 10. When a man in Indiana was caught stealing scratch-off lottery tickets from a convenience store, the judge decided to gamble on an unusual sentence. The man had to stand outside the same store for 40 hours holding a sign that read, "I'm a lottery loser who steals dreams." But the real genius, he had to watch every single person who walked in to buy legitimate tickets, forced to witness the hope he tried to steal while advertising his own failure as a human billboard of bad decisions. 11. A group of teenagers in Ohio thought it would be funny to leave a flaming bag of dog poop on someone's doorstep. The old classic prank. Judge Wilson gave them a classic punishment with a modern twist. Each teen had to create a TikTok video apologizing to the victim, explaining their crime, and demonstrating the proper way to dispose of dog waste. The videos had to get at least 10,000 views before their sentence was complete. The judge weaponized social media, turning their punishment into a viral confession that would follow them forever. 12. In New Jersey, a man was convicted of consistently parking in front of fire hydrants, despite multiple tickets. The judge ordered him to spend a weekend at the fire station, but he wasn't doing community service. He was attending mandatory training on fire safety and watching footage of real emergencies where blocked hydrants caused delays. Then came the finale. He had to sit in a running fire truck in full gear in the middle of summer for 2 hours to understand the urgency firefighters feel. The judge turned discomfort into education, 1 sweaty minute at a time. 13. A woman in Oregon was caught lying on her resume to get a high-paying job, claiming degrees she never earned. When convicted of fraud, the judge enrolled her in the local community college and ordered her to actually earn an associate's degree while working a minimum wage job. She had to attend classes, do homework, and pass exams, all while on probation. The judge didn't just punish the lie. He forced her to live the truth she should have pursued in the first place. 14. In Texas, a man repeatedly let his dog bark all night, driving his neighbors to madness. After numerous complaints, a judge delivered a sentence of perfect symmetry. For 30 consecutive nights, the man had to sleep in his backyard in a tent while a recording of his own dog barking played on a loop. The judge didn't just make him hear the problem. He forced him to experience exactly what his neighbors endured, night after miserable night. 15. 2 women in South Dakota were caught creating fake charity organizations and pocketing donation money. The judge ordered them to work at a legitimate nonprofit for a year, but with a special condition. They had to wear t-shirts every single day that said, "Ask me about my fraud conviction." Every donor, every volunteer, every person they encountered had to be told their story. The judge turned them into walking confession booths, ensuring their crime became their introduction to everyone they met. 16. A man in Washington was arrested for repeatedly calling 911 to complain about non-emergencies, everything from cold pizza to slow internet. The judge sentenced him to 100 hours working as a dispatcher trainer, where he had to listen to recordings of real emergency calls, including ones where people died because lines were tied up. Then he had to write a 50-page report on why emergency services matter. The judge transformed his ignorance into education through the most heartbreaking curriculum imaginable. 17. In Michigan, a teenager hacked into his school's computer system and changed his grades. The judge, recognizing technical skill misdirected, gave him an option: juvenile detention or teach a semester-long cybersecurity course to senior citizens at the local community center. He chose teaching. For 4 months, this kid had to explain phishing scams, password security, and online safety to elderly people who called the mouse the clicker. It was punishment disguised as community service, wrapped in intergenerational humiliation. 18. A woman in Florida was convicted of making false accusations against multiple men, claiming harassment that never happened. The judge's sentence was a masterclass in public accountability. She had to take out ads in 3 local newspapers with her photo and a statement retracting her false claims and apologizing to each person by name. The judge didn't just correct the record. He made her pay to broadcast her own dishonesty to everyone who'd read the original accusations. 19. In Kansas, a man was caught repeatedly stealing flowers from a public memorial garden. The judge sentenced him to plant and maintain an entirely new memorial garden from scratch. Every weekend for a year, he had to dig, plant, water, and weed a dedicated space that would honor veterans. The judge replaced his destructive theft with creative labor, forcing him to build something worthy of the respect he'd violated. 20. A teenager in Minnesota was arrested for cyberbullying a classmate with cruel messages and photoshopped images. The judge offered a choice: traditional juvenile detention or work with a therapist who specialized in helping bullying victims for 6 months while keeping a daily journal about empathy. At the end, he had to read the entire journal aloud in court. The judge didn't just stop the behavior, he tried to surgically remove the cruelty from the kid's personality, one therapy session at a time. 21. In North Carolina, a woman refused to return shopping carts to the designated area, leaving them scattered across the parking lot despite multiple warnings. When she finally got ticketed and appeared in court, the judge delivered sentence fitting the laziness: 20 hours working as a cart collector at the very store where she shopped. In the summer heat, she had to chase down carts across the massive parking lot while her neighbors and friends saw her. The judge didn't just make her do the job, he made her do it in front of everyone who knew. Her. 22. A man in Connecticut was convicted of insurance fraud after faking a workplace injury to collect disability payments while secretly running marathons. The judge's sentence was athletically cruel. He had to volunteer as a coach for a youth wheelchair basketball team for 1 year. Every practice, every game, he had to witness real athletes with genuine disabilities working harder than he ever had, turning his fraud into a year-long lesson in what actual struggle looks like. 23. In Virginia, a couple was caught running an illegal Airbnb in a residential zone, disturbing neighbors with constant parties. The judge didn't just fine them, he sentenced them to attend every single neighborhood association meeting for a year and personally apologize at each one. Then they had to volunteer to organize the annual neighborhood block party. The judge forced them to become active, contributing members of the very community they'd been exploiting. 24. A man in Iowa was arrested for public intoxication after drunkenly singing at the top of his lungs at 3 a.m. in a residential area. The judge, a former music teacher, saw an opportunity. The sentence: mandatory enrollment in a formal vocal training class twice a week for 6 months. If he was going to sing drunk in public, he was going to learn to do it properly first. It's a sentence that doesn't punish the joy, just the execution and timing. 25. 2 teenagers in Alaska vandalized a local coffee shop, breaking windows and spray painting the walls. The judge ordered them to work at the coffee shop for free, opening shift, for 3 months. Every morning at 5 a.m., they had to show up, make coffee, serve customers, and clean up, all while the owner supervised. The judge didn't just make them repair the damage. He made them serve the very people whose gathering place they destroyed, one early morning cappuccino at a time. 26. A woman in Massachusetts was convicted of repeatedly making false complaints to the health department about restaurants she'd had bad experiences with, trying to get them shut down. The judge sentenced her to work as a health inspector's assistant for 100 hours, where she had to learn actual health code violations versus personal grievances. Then she had to write formal apologies to every restaurant she'd falsely reported. The judge educated her ignorance and then made her acknowledge it publicly. 27. In Colorado, a man was caught littering cigarette butts constantly, flicking them out his car window onto sidewalks everywhere. After his 5th ticket, the judge gave him a choice: a $1,000 fine or pick up 10,000 cigarette butts from public spaces while wearing a bright orange vest that said "Litterbug." He chose the butts. For weeks, this man crawled around parks and streets, collecting tiny pieces of trash, living proof that the punishment can indeed fit the crime. Exactly. 28. A professional baker in Pennsylvania was convicted of knowingly selling expired baked goods to a school district to fulfill a contract cheaper. The judge's sentence was deliciously appropriate. She had to bake and donate fresh goods to the school every week for an entire year at her own expense, with health inspectors randomly checking quality. The judge turned her crime into a year-long, unpaid contract with accountability she'd tried to avoid. 29. In Hawaii, a tourist was caught carving his initials into a protected ancient rock formation. The judge sentenced him to work with archaeologists and conservationists for 6 months, painstakingly documenting and helping preserve historical sites. He also had to fund the repair of the damage, which cost $15,000. The judge made him protector of the very history he'd defaced. 30. Teenager in Mississippi was arrested for creating deepfake videos of his teachers in embarrassing situations. The judge, tech-savvy enough to understand the violation, sentenced him to create a series of educational videos about digital ethics, consent, and the dangers of AI manipulation. These videos had to be approved by a media ethics professor and then shown to every student in his school. The judge weaponized his own skills against him, turning the perpetrator into a reluctant educator. 31. In Montana, a man was convicted of repeatedly fly-tipping, illegal dumping, construction waste in remote areas. The judge sentenced him to hike to each location, remove every piece of trash he dumped, and carry it out on his back. No vehicles allowed for the removal, only the same trails hikers used. It took him 3 months of weekends. The judge made the cleanup as inconvenient as the original dumping was convenient. 32. A woman in Delaware was caught using her handicapped parking placard that belonged to her deceased grandmother. The judge ordered her to spend 40 hours volunteering at a physical rehabilitation center, helping people with actual disabilities with their daily tasks. She had to witness firsthand the struggles of the people whose parking spaces she'd stolen. The judge built empathy through forced proximity to truth. 33. In South Carolina, a man was arrested for stealing packages off porches during the holiday season. The judge sentenced him to work as a delivery driver's helper for a local charity during the next holiday season, delivering gifts to underprivileged families. For an entire month, he had to be the delivery guy instead of the thief, experiencing the joy he'd been stealing from others. 34. A group of college students in Vermont was caught sneaking into a closed ski resort at night. Instead of trespassing charges, the judge sentenced them to work on the ski patrol safety team for a season, where they learned about avalanche dangers, rescue operations, and why closed areas are closed. The judge transformed their recklessness into respect through education and exhausting volunteer work. 35. In Rhode Island, a woman was convicted of making dozens of false returns at retail stores, claiming items were defective when they weren't. The judge sentenced her to work in customer service at a major retailer for 200 hours, dealing with returns and complaints. She had to be on the receiving end of the very scam she'd perfected, experiencing the frustration from the other side of the counter. 36. A man in New Mexico was caught poaching protected desert tortoises. The judge sentenced him to build protective habitats for the species and work with wildlife conservationists for a year. Additionally, he had to sponsor the care of 3 rescued tortoises at his own expense. The judge turned the poacher into a reluctant conservationist, forcing him to fund and protect the very animals he'd harmed. 37. In Maine, a teenager was arrested for creating a fake social media account to catfish and manipulate multiple people emotionally. The judge sentenced her to attend weekly therapy, focusing on digital empathy, and then volunteer at a teen crisis hotline for 6 months. She had to help people dealing with the very kind of emotional manipulation she'd inflicted on others. 38. A man in Kentucky was convicted of repeatedly calling in fake bomb threats to get out of work. The judge sentenced him to attend a day-long seminar with bomb squad technicians, watching footage of real threats, learning about the danger responders face, and understanding the cost of each false call. Then he had to write personal apologies to every first responder who'd responded to his hoaxes. 39. In Oklahoma, a woman was caught counterfeiting coupons and using them at multiple stores. The judge sentenced her to work in a grocery store's coupon processing department for 100 hours, manually validating legitimate coupons and learning the systems she'd tried to cheat. The judge immersed her in the very process she'd tried to exploit. 40. A man in Wyoming was arrested for vandalizing a "Welcome to Town" sign by spray painting crude images on it. The judge ordered him to research the town's history, write a comprehensive report, and then design and paint a new community mural, approved by a committee, on a designated public wall. The judge transformed his destructive vandalism into constructive public art. 41. In Arkansas, a teenager was caught cheating on his SATs by paying someone to take the test for him. The judge gave him two choices. The charges stay on his record, or he retakes the SAT at a designated testing center where his score would be sent to colleges with a letter explaining his previous fraud. He also had to tutor underprivileged students preparing for the test for 100 hours. The judge made him earn legitimately what he'd tried to steal. 42. A woman in West Virginia was convicted of making numerous false complaints to the police about her neighbors, wasting hundreds of hours of police time. The judge sentenced her to ride along with police officers for 10 different shifts to see what their actual job entailed. Then she had to write an essay on the difference between real emergencies and personal disputes. The judge educated her through immersion. 43. In New Hampshire, a man was caught repeatedly fishing without a license in protected waters. The judge sentenced him to work with fish and wildlife officers for 6 months, helping with conservation efforts, tagging fish, and monitoring ecosystems. He also had to pay for a lifetime fishing license and take a mandatory conservation course. The judge turned the poacher into a protector. 44. A teenager in Nebraska was arrested for sneaking into movie theaters without paying. The judge sentenced him to work at the theater for 80 hours, not in concessions or cleaning, but in the ticket booth, watching everyone else pay for their tickets while he had to smile and serve them. The judge put him in the exact position to witness the honest behavior he'd avoided. 45. In North Dakota, a woman was convicted of making false claims about a competitor's business online, leaving dozens of fake negative reviews. The judge ordered her to take a business ethics course, write and publish formal retractions on each platform, and volunteer at a small business development center, helping new businesses for 100 hours. The judge made her support the very business community she'd tried to manipulate. 46. A man in Missouri was caught using his drone to spy on his neighbors, flying it over their yards and filming through windows. The judge didn't just confiscate the drone. He sentenced the man to attend privacy rights seminars and then give presentations at community centers about drone laws and personal privacy boundaries. The judge turned the violator into an educator on the rights he'd ignored. 47. In Utah, a teenager vandalized a memorial bench dedicated to a deceased community member. The judge sentenced him to research the person's life, write a biography, and then read it aloud at a community gathering. Additionally, he had to help the family maintain the memorial site for a year. The judge forced him to know and honor the person whose memory he'd defaced. 48. A woman in Idaho was convicted of abandoning multiple cats, leaving them in boxes by the roadside. The judge sentenced her to volunteer at an animal shelter for 200 hours, specifically in the cat intake area where she'd have to process and care for abandoned animals. She also had to pay for the medical care of the cats she'd abandoned and attend mandatory classes on responsible pet ownership. The judge surrounded her with the consequences of her cruelty. 49. A man in Vermont was caught cutting down trees on public land to improve his own property's view. The judge sentenced him to plant 100 new trees in various public spaces, care for them for 2 years, and fund an environmental education program. The judge didn't just replace what was stolen, he demanded investment in the public good. All right, we've covered 49 absurdly creative punishments. But before we get to our final one, it's time for the final verdict. In our opinion, the award for the most brilliantly twisted punishment goes to number 8, the kid who had to paint a giant mural of the judge who sentenced him. The sheer poetic beauty of forcing someone to create a permanent, public monument to their own humiliation while simultaneously beautifying the community is chef's kiss levels of judicial creativity. It's punishment, public art, and ego destruction all rolled into one masterpiece. But maybe you disagree. Maybe another punishment deserves the crown. Drop your pick in the comments and tell us why. And now, our final number, 50. A man in California ran an elaborate scam, posing as a charity worker and collecting donations for veterans that he pocketed himself. When he was finally caught, the judge delivered a sentence that was profound in its simplicity and devastating in its execution. The man was ordered to attend the funeral of a veteran, a stranger, every single month for 2 years. He had to witness the grief, the military honors, the families left behind, the flag-folding ceremonies. He couldn't just attend. He had to stay for the entire service and sign a log proving he was there. warfare. The judge didn't just punish his greed, he forced him to confront the sacred honor he'd exploited, one heartbreaking funeral at a time. This wasn't about rehabilitation or restitution. This was about forcing a hollow man to stand in the presence of genuine sacrifice until maybe, just maybe, something real finally broke through. So there you have it. From human billboards to forced artistry, from environmental punishment to psychological warfare. These sentences prove that creativity isn't dead in the legal system. It's just been weaponized in the most unexpected ways. But here's the real question. Are these judges brilliant reformers using shame and irony to create lasting change? Or are they just power-tripping authoritarians who've turned courtrooms into personal theaters of revenge? Is public humiliation an effective deterrent, or just cruelty dressed up as justice? We genuinely want to know where you stand on this. Drop your honest take in the comments below. And if you think the legal system's strangest moments deserve a spotlight, hit that subscribe button and smash the like. Because the intersection of law and absurdity, that's content that never runs out.